Here with Andrew Cooper. Welcome into the Quick Out Fantasy Football Podcast and live stream here. We are today breaking down the AFC North as we continue our division by division fantasy football preview for the upcoming 2023 NFL season. My guy Coop, man, how you been?
Fantastic, man. I'm just looking for some news. Let's get some sports stuff going. Let's sign some running backs. Let's move the Hall of Fame game up. It should really be in July, right? August is too far. It's too long to wait. What do you think, John?
Listen, the sooner we get football, the better. Obviously, OTAs have come and gone. We're waiting for training camp to kind of kick up here and get more news and action, like you said. But that doesn't happen now for what, like a month, basically? Rookies don't report here till like the middle of July. So
good news, though, John, is I got a little something that can hold the people over for the time being, besides the show, obviously.
Well, what's that, Coop?
The NFL Fantasy Alarm Draft Guide is out. There it is right there on your screen. It is out. It's got all the early stuff in there because we like to get rankings out now. So you have not only my rankings, Howard Bender's rankings, but I also have my dynamic rankings in there. So you can see what I'm thinking and also how I think. We've got articles coming out every single day, and that's going to go all the way through September. So get in there now, $26.99 right now, or even better, sign up with a subscription. If you use promo code COOP, you get 50% off the first 6 months, and you get 7 days free. So you can actually go in there and read everything that's in there, look at all of it, decide if you want to do it or not, and hell, screenshot the rankings if you want. Just know that we're going to be uploading them, updating them all summer. So if you screenshot them now, you're not going to get the full updated ones. But anyway, get in there, check it out now. 7 days free right now.
Yeah, definitely want to get involved. 7 days free. You sign up. Use fantasystorm.com/all-pro promo code NFL50. 50% off the 6 months. It comes with that. It comes with access to our premium Discord, which has been revamped, ready to go for the upcoming fantasy football season. So a lot of great things happening right now over at Fantasy Storm when it comes to getting you guys ready to dominate your fantasy football seasons here. Coop, like we were talking about here, we've been going division by division here, breaking down the notable news, the top stories, the fantasy players that you need to know about, the draft odds, and all the good stuff here. So let's waste no time. Our guy Toronto Dave in the chat here. What's going on? Happy to have you join in today.
Shout out Toronto area.
Yeah, we're breaking down the NFC North today. So why don't we kick it off? Why don't we start it off with the Pittsburgh Steelers here? Coop, a team last year got over the 500 record, kept that little run alive for Mike Tomlin, went 9-8. They added some cornerback help here. They added Patrick Peterson in the offseason. They drafted Joey Porter Jr., who slid down draft boards. Many thought he was going to be a first-round pick this year. Ends up going in the second round to his dad's former team. They lost a cornerback here in Cameron Sutton in the offseason as well. Vegas has him at 8.5 wins, but the over's minus 150. So people looking at the Steelers to have another winning year here. They're plus 450 though to win the North. Highly competitive division with the Bengals, with the Ravens, and with the Browns there. Plus 5,000 to win the Super Bowl. The biggest story on this team is going to go as the man in the picture goes. Kenny Pickett takes that step forward. The Steelers will take that step forward, man. What are your thoughts here on Pittsburgh going into the year?
Yeah, this is a fun division and this is a fun team. And that Kenny Pickett really, to me, is the story. Because if you look at the ADPs for some of these guys, might as well get into them now. You look at Najee Harris. He's going ADP 36. He's going as an RB1, RB12. Deontay Johnson going 65 overall. George Pickens going 75 overall. Pat Freiermuth going 100. Even Jalen Warren's going 139. And guys like Allen Robinson are being drafted. But then there's Kenny Pickett going ADP 170, QB 23 off the board. John, you and me had this conversation last year where something has to give, right? We looked at it with the Dolphins last year where Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, all these guys are getting drafted, Mike Gesicki, and then no one's taking Tua. Turns out that the people drafting the weapons were right, but the people drafting Tua were also very right. He was on track to be a QB1. If these guys are going to live up to their ADP or surpass it, right? Like you only draft guys, like if I'm drafting wide receiver 34, I'm not drafting him to be wide receiver 34, right, John? I'm drafting him because I think he can be better than that. So if these guys are going to live up to what we believe or even come close to it, Kenny Pickett needs to take a big step forward from 7 touchdowns last year to being the guy.
Yeah.
So there's either we need to be fading these guys a lot, like we're talking 3 guys here being drafted,
Yeah.
including the running back. Either we got to start fading these guys, or we got to be in on Pickett. John, your instincts right now are what? Are you which way are you going?
Listen, I'm willing to take a shot on him in drafts. Now, again, we're in the middle of best ball season, so this show will talk a little bit of best ball value, but for seasonal purposes here, Deontay Johnson still had like a good year. George Pickens still had like a good year, even with Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett sort of alternating at quarterback. And you don't have to draft them as highly as you did last year. But we are at a point now, to a lesser extent, where we were looking at Tua last year. And we'll just continue to use that as a comparison because there was such a discrepancy in ADP between the wide receivers and the quarterback. And obviously, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle were being drafted among the top 20 wide receivers last year. And Tua was sitting at QB 17. You're like, well, both can't be right? Exactly. You can't have a quarterback finish QB 17 and 2 wide receivers finish top 20. It just can't happen. Turns out Tua was way better than where his ADP was going. Now, Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, wide receiver 39, 34, less of a need to meet, right? Like it's easier
still,
to repeat that.
Still, this year, the way it's going with how wide receivers are going off the board so quickly that they go before Freiermuth goes, and sure. Freiermuth is going as a top 10 tight end. Mm-hmm. So I know that it, and virtually every league, you're talking about the wide receiver 34, virtually every league has 3 starting wide receivers and a flex spot. So wide receiver 34 is a guy that's expected to be in lineups. So, the way I look at it, John, is this. I personally think Deontay Johnson's the guy. There was a period there, if you remember, John, on Underdog. Remember when George Pickens was going before Deontay Johnson? What was that all about? I don't know.
They like the big play potential for George Pickens. Like, that dude can make a lot of ridiculous catches. He can be a crazy red zone threat for them if Pickett takes that step forward. We saw them connect on a couple of times last year on some deep ball throws downfield. Deontay Johnson's been that underneath guy. He's been more of that reliable chain mover for this offense here. He'll get the volume in PPR leagues. But I think people are intrigued. It's, again, unfair comparison, but it's like Mike Williams versus Keenan Allen.
Right. No, I think that's exactly right. I was thinking the same thing. If things go exactly right for Justin Herbert, that's what you're looking at, because Mike Williams is a guy that flashes like crazy too, right? He makes the crazy catches, obviously injury prone. The way I look at it is this, like in your real leagues, which is where we're shifting our focus to now. We've done a lot of best ball. Obviously, we're still doing best ball drafts. Use promo code Fantasy Alarm if you're not in there. We're doing them we have a slow draft going right now, with the Fantasy Alarm members. So get in there on that. But when I look at it, like, I personally think Deontay Johnson's the top dog. Even if you think Kenny Pickett takes a step forward, he can support maybe 2 weapons, right? So in my opinion, you kind of need to make a decision. Do you think it's going to be George Pickens? Do you think it's going to be Pat Freiermuth? I see a lot of people ranking Pat Freiermuth as the 3rd target on this team behind Pickens and Deontay Johnson, yet they're still expressing interest in drafting Freiermuth. And I just feel like that's betting against yourself. Like, if you think if he's going to be 3rd and he's going to be relevant, then you must have Kenny Pickett in every league. That's kind of the dichotomy there. So you got to make that decision for yourself. There's a lot of good things for Freiermuth in terms of red zone. I posted a tweet the other day that showed that when it came to 2-minute drill, he had, which is, I looked up last 3 minutes of games, and in the last 3 minutes of the second quarter, fourth quarter, or overtime, when the team was down by less than 2 scores or tied, no one got more targets than Pat Freiermuth. No one had a higher percentage of those targets than Pat Freiermuth. So they do lean on the guy, but it's just a matter of, is there going to be 90 targets for him, John? So I don't know. If you had to pick right now, would you rather draft George Pickens at ADP or Freiermuth at ADP?
Probably Pickens at ADP. Yeah. I think I would go there. Again, like the tight end position, I mean, you know it more than anybody. I saw you tweet about it the other day where they're like, well, the difference between points between this guy and that guy is only X. And you're like, well, if you want to break it down to wide receiver, the difference between wide receiver, whatever, and whatever was also this, like a huge gap, kind of make that argument however you want. But like, I hate throwing around league winner because George Pickens won't be a league winner, but like George Pickens has a much higher impact on your fantasy team. if George Pickens becomes a top 20 wide receiver versus Pat Fryermuth being a top 10 tight end, who's making a bigger impact on your fantasy team? It's George Pickens.
Truly, right. Yeah, like overall points, we forget. We think so much about positional scarcity. Like, I guess there's two ways to look at it, John. If they both get equal targets, Pat Fryermuth is the more valuable player because he has a positional scarcity, right?
Correct.
But I'm with you that I think George Pickens gets more. So here's how I'm treating Fryermuth. If I wait in my draft on tight end and I get him for a reasonable value, like he's going tight end 10, say nobody's taking him or whatever, he's just sitting there, I'll pick him and I'll start him week 1. And I'll say to myself, okay, even if he's the third target on the team, he's kind of safe. But if I do that, I'm going with the classic yin yang tight end. I'm using a second spot to pick the highest risk, highest reward guy and try to shoot the moon. So that's kind of how I'm handling that. Before we move on to some prop bets, John, Najee Harris, ADP 36. So he's going. I typically see him, the mock drafts and the drafts I've done, is that he goes at the beginning of the third round, or he goes the middle of the third round, but I rarely ever see him go in the second. Do you like him in the third round, John? You think that's the right ADP, or how do you feel about Najee?
Listen, we know the volume is going to be there for him. We know his impact in the passing game. It's always been sort of an offensive line problem for him, right? Like the offensive lines are so bad, they can't create holes. The defenses know they can just kind of push up on them. And last year we saw what happens when the inefficiency really comes into play, right? He didn't nearly have the success he had as a rookie. Still got the volume, but it wasn't at the same level, and therefore he did not even come close to paying off where his ADP was. But he's still an elite pass catcher, still a guy that's going to be a workhound. I don't buy the Jaylen Warren hype. I just think people were looking for, we're looking for a reason to like downgrade Najee Harris here. Like Najee Harris is the guy in this offense. So am I getting to him? I haven't yet, but I don't think this offense is that bad. Najee's maybe going a little too high for me, but like, Diontae Johnson, George Pickens, where they're going in drafts, like you're taking them as like probably your wide receiver 3 at this point. So
yeah,
you can live with them as a wide receiver 3. You're not counting them to be the wide receiver 1 or 2 like you needed Diontae to be a couple seasons ago. And Kenny Pickett's not being drafted as your QB1 outside of a super flex league. So you can kind of take shots on that offense. They come through great. You find a diamond in the rough. If they don't, you kind of just, they're not high draft picks that you're wasting capital on. So Najee's kind of an interesting guy, though. I'm kind of pulling up some of his player props here, rushing props for the year, kind of seeing where they have him queued up at. They got him for 975.5 yards rushing on the season, so just under 1,000 yards.
I hate those running back props, man. I truly do, because basically, John, what you're betting is you're betting on two things: that you like the player and that he doesn't get hurt. And that's how they sucker you in, right? Because like, if you really think about, when I look at those lines and you line up every running back line up there, I look at it and I say, if this guy doesn't get hurt, he should surpass it for every single player. So it's kind of baked in there. Like if you're going to start doing those, you need to do a bunch of them, in my opinion.
100%.
Yeah.
Diontae Johnson is at 825.5. Last year, he had 885 for the season.
Right.
So something to pay attention there. George Pickens, his receiving yards is at 750 and a half receiving yards. Last year as a rookie, Pickens finished with 800. So
to put that in perspective, last year, guys in the 750-yard range, I went off the top of my head, that's where they had Adam Thielen, right? So like, kind of projecting him to be a little touchdown dependent. And the real scary one, John, is the Kenny Pickett line. You know where that one's at? 3,300. So we're talking guys like Josh Allen, Kirk Cousins. Their Vegas odds are projecting them to throw over 1,000 more yards than Kenny Pickett. So I think the easiest way, honestly, if you want access to betting on these situations, is maybe to either draft Kenny Pickett or just bet the over on his yardage. Like if you like all these guys, shout out to our buddy Herms, who's a big Steelers guy. I keep talking about this and he doesn't want to fade anybody. I'm like, hey, why don't you just bet the over on passing yards for Kenny Pickett, right? Like that's an easy way to get access to this without ruining your fantasy season.
Yep, I agree with you there 100%. Just from team props here, looking at going to the Super Bowl for this Steelers team. Not very good.
It's not
it's plus 5,000, plus 450 to win the North here. Again, 8.5 win total is their over under. So Probably not going to hit the other two, but they could hit the over 8.5. That's not impossible.
Yeah, I don't like it. Well, the thing is, at over 8.5, I was checking out some lines, man. Can you find a reasonable line? Because like what I was seeing, you have to pay like, it's like minus 150 to
Yeah,
bet
just
the
I said, it's
over.
minus 150 right now at 8.5.
Yeah,
It's
I hate
juiced
that
up.
shit. If you can
So
find something, that's close to like 110 or 120, then maybe. But I'm not paying 150 to bet on the Steelers.
yeah, I agree with you. Let's transition now over to maybe one of the more interesting teams of the offseason. That is the Baltimore Ravens here. Weren't sure if Lamar Jackson was going to be back. Ends up signing, coming back to the team here. Change of offensive coordinators. They signed Odell Beckham Jr. in the offseason as well to bolster their wide receiving group, along with using a pick there on Zay Flowers. Many people expecting big things out of Flowers here this year. 10-7 record last year. They have a 10.5 win total, plus 105 on the over, though, over in Las Vegas here. Odds to win the North are plus 240, and their Super Bowl odds are plus 2,000. Coot, man, thoughts on the Baltimore Ravens in their offseason?
Yeah, let's do fantasy and then we'll do the betting. That's kind
Sure.
of the way to do it. I'll tell you this, just as an overall offseason, bringing Lamar Jackson back, huge. But to me, when you bring back the incumbent guy, that's not like, I don't consider that a change. I think
No.
the biggest change, forget all the personnel, man. Todd Monken, right? The air raid, going from Greg, like sometimes you bring in a coach that does similar things and it's not that big of a move. Like
Yeah.
a lot of times a team, if your offensive coordinator gets hired away, sometimes you just bring in somebody and say, hey, just do the same thing that guy did.
Mm-hmm.
With this team, they fired Greg Roman, who is the most run heavy coach, hates throwing it to the running back. This goes all the way back to his time at the 49ers, like insanely run heavy to go to the air raid. They're going to spread it out. They're going to use 4 wide receivers, or they're going to use 3 wide receivers and a tight end in a slot position, which they have 2 that do that. Like, this is exciting times, right? So I'm excited to see what's going to happen here. I'm wondering what they're going to do with Patrick Ricard, because he was playing a ton of snaps at fullback. He's probably going to start at least camp on the pup after hip surgery. He might be phased out. Not
Yeah.
that, but interesting stuff here, John, from that standpoint. And they went and got the personnel. You can't say they didn't try,
Right.
because they paid Odell Beckham $15 million. They drafted Zay Flowers in the first round. I mean, what more can you really do? This wasn't even it was a pretty bad free agency for wide receivers, right? Like,
Right.
what are they going to do instead of sending Odell? Sign Juju?
Trade
Right?
for
Like,
Allen Robinson,
trade.
right?
I guess, yeah.
Really wasn't, which
Nah.
we didn't even talk about it for Pittsburgh, but did make the Allen Robinson trade there. Listen, I agree with you. I guess my one question with this offense here is like, Lamar Jackson said, hopefully this means less running for him. Your fantasy value is kind
I don't like
of
that.
baked
Yeah.
in on your ability to run the football. Now, running the football has obviously caused some injuries for Lamar over the last couple of years, and that has been, one of the longevity questions for mobile quarterbacks in the NFL is if they're running around a lot, they take some unnecessary hits, and they end up getting hurt. But Lamar, putting your faith in Lamar to be a passing quarterback like Russell Wilson, right? Where Russell Wilson has the mobility, uses the mobility when he needs to, and can be a threat on the ground, but he's a throw-first quarterback. If that's what they're looking for now out of Lamar Jackson, that could obviously go 2 ways. That could turn into a huge season for him throwing the football with a lot of success, or a lot of people don't think he's that good of a passer. So,
Right.
it could really highlight his deficiencies throwing the football, and could turn into a bad season for him from a fantasy perspective, or they have to scrap it and go back to him running the football. So a lot of questions for me with Lamar in this offense, but if you're a wide receiver in this offense, you have to be excited.
Right.
If you're
I'll say that. I'll say this with Lamar. This is where we get into scary town for dynasty, right? Because when you look at the true mobile quarterbacks throughout history, they're statistically kind of like running backs, where if they don't transition, like you talked about with Russell Wilson, then they fall off the cliff pretty hard right around the same time that running backs do. And Lamar Jackson at 26 years old, going to be 27 in January, he's now entering that zone where you got to transition. Because like I went back and looked at the numbers for quarterbacks at like 29 or older, even 28 or older. There's basically 2 pure-ish mobile quarterbacks that have been fantasy relevant, and it's Mike Vick coming out of jail, which maybe a little less wear and tear, right?
Right.
And then Cam Newton. who, Cam Newton kind of powered his way.
Yeah, the rushing touchdowns for
12
Cam
touchdowns.
Newton. It really wasn't a good year for Cam Newton.
No, it wasn't. So it's like you need to become Steve Young, or you need to become Russell Wilson, or else it's scary. And especially if the team is saying, hey, we're running a pass first offense, dude, this is time for him. Like, he needs to make that move. So you're right. It is scary, but if he can do it and keep some of that mobility, now you get Russell Wilson, which, man, for early 30s, Russell Wilson was kind of crushing still,
Yeah, 100%. What are you doing with the running backs?
I'm not taking J.K. Dobbins. I'm not doing it. Maybe Todd Monken forces Lamar Jackson to dump it down more. But if you look at the 3 teams last year, we talked about this last week, John, that threw the ball to the running back the least of any teams. It was the Chicago Bears, the Philadelphia Eagles, and this team, right? They just, mobile quarterbacks statistically don't dump it down. Andrew Erickson did the math on that, right? Like, we've seen the research already. So, like, for me, J.K. Dobbins, if he could be, his ceiling is like a Miles Sanders type guy where he's very efficient, and hopefully he can brute force.
Big play guy. He's a big play running back.
Big play. He need those big plays. Like, underdog, I like him, right? But for me, I'd almost rather just take Gus Edwards.
Yeah,
right? Like, just
I'll wait. Late round, final pick of the draft sort of thing there.
He runs 5 yards a carry too, and he's 238 pounds or whatever. So if there is going to be a goal line guy besides Lamar Jackson, it would probably be him. I just worry that, J.K. Dobbins is just going to be between the tackles guy. So I'm not really touching those guys. I have much more Gus than I have Dobbins, and I'm willing to be proven wrong. Like, if J.K. Dobbins, I think he's a good runner. That's the thing. And if they do start throwing it to him, I mean, next year we'll all be drafting him in the first round.
Well, that too. I'm also curious if they do decide to spread the offense more, throwing the football, does that just make it easier for him to run? Right? Defenses knew in the last years. All right, they're running RPOs, and if they're not running an RPO, they're throwing it to Andrews over the middle, right? So it's now if they're spreading the offense out, that makes defenses sort of change their coverages. Now they're in nickel, or they're in dime, and softer middles, and open more gaps up for big plays out of Dobbins there. So that offense will certainly be interesting for how the running back usage gets there. Touch on Andrews here, tight end 2 ADP 30. I don't generally like the draft guys at the top of their ADPs, and this one kind of feels, again, he's tight end 2. So, do you feel like he is able to repeat, or do you think he is worthy of just kind of passing over?
Yeah. So personally, I'll take him. If my philosophy has been, if he gets to the 3rd round, I take him. I've done some drafts where I just take Lamar and Andrews, bing bang stack at like the turn there. Like, if it goes all the way down and around, but it's tough for me personally, consider I'm contractually obligated to find breakout tight ends to use an early pick, right? Like, that's just my personal philosophy. But I'll tell you this, to people out there listening to this podcast or watching live here, what you really want to do is to lean into what you're good at. So if you hate tight end and you don't want to deal with it, then just draft a Kelsey or an Andrews or Hawkinson or whatever, and just forget about it, right? And if you love drafting wide receivers, wait on wide receivers. There are so many. I've got buddies that, like, all they like to do is add wide receivers. Like, that's all they care about. But they also draft a million of them, and they just end up with like a team filled with wide receivers, a bench full of them. Lean into your strengths, right? So that's where I'm at. Mark Andrews, I think he's going to thrive in this offense because he lines up at wide receiver so much. So it's not like when you go air raid, you have to use 4 guys that are labeled wide receiver. Zach Ertz for the Cardinals would just line up at wide receiver, and that's what it would be. So I think he's going to be just fine. I'm willing to draft him. I think that other people should draft him. It's a personal philosophy thing for me.
Sure. Let's take a look at some of the betting odds here for this team here. Again, kind of pulling up the graph.
Before we get in bet odds, John, let me ask. Rashad Bateman goes at 89 ADP. Zay Flowers goes at 90. So back to back. Odell at 111. Who do you like best? I've seen you draft some Zay Flowers. Who do you like best?
I have a lot of Zay Flowers.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't invest at that draft, that draft capital in a wide receiver without really the expectation that he is your number 1 wide receiver option, starting wide receiver for sure. The Bateman thing's kind of interesting. I've seen some Twitter doctors kind of tweet out their success rate of guys coming back from his injury and how they've performed and the rate of they've performed. And the numbers really weren't great. And the fact that they've invested at the wide receiver position kind of have me a little worried there. I don't have any Odell.
Me neither.
coming off of 2 knee injuries, missing a whole year. Like, if he comes out and is a productive wide receiver, like, hats off, right? Like,
right. And I don't like there's a difference between him and some other guys. Like, I don't like the way he's gone about it. Like, if you're gonna impress me with your work ethic and your off season, you coming back to form, getting so drunk that you're kicked off a plane
right.
it's not really doing it for me, man. Like, I want to see you just on Instagram posting videos of you moving a sled.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm with you. John, how about this? I like Bateman, you like Zay Flowers. Most points, half PPR. Loser buys the other one a pretzel at the Harpoon Brewery in Boston. You in?
Sure. I love those Harpoon Brewery pretzels. So
They'll give us an excuse to go there anyway. I got Bateman, you got Flowers. Let's go.
That's true, 100%. I'll take that bet for sure.
Jot it down.
We'll cheers on that one. Betting odds here for Baltimore here. They have a plus 105 and a 10.5 wins, plus 240 on the North, and plus 2,000 on the Super Bowl. Which ones do you like the best?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of do like the division plus 240, right?
Yeah.
I don't mind that one because I think any team can win this division. But with the new offense and Lamar Jackson, I could see it happening. I don't, the Bengals, they didn't do a whole lot this offseason besides lose both their safeties. I mean, I'm a little worried that they're just bringing back the same team, only slightly worse.
Right.
A little concerned there, but we'll get to that team next. Lamar Jackson, the MVP, is kind of intriguing too. Again, this one they set the over-unders 9.5, but you have to pay minus 170, right? Like, they're trying to force you to bet the under at plus 150, and I don't want to. So I'm kind of just staying away from the Super Bowl. And the thing with the Super Bowl that I don't like is that one you have to bank on a lot of longevity, right? Like, Lamar Jackson's getting injured every year. It's hard for me to bet them to just be able to string together wins down the stretch, but I am willing to bet on them to win the division. So that's kind of it for me in terms of those bets. I kind of am intrigued with betting the under for Lamar Jackson for rushing, though, right? The line I saw 725. If he's telling the truth, then maybe he's just not going to run as much. Maybe he runs for 400, 500 yards and throws the ball more. Kind of feels like
that's also a number where, like, I mean, if you want to play the injury game, like, take the under, see if he gets hurt. Like,
there's a couple ways to that one. Yeah, I like having a couple outs. It's like poker, right? Like, we have the straight flush draw. Like, you can either he's telling the truth and they run less, or maybe he gets hurt. So, kind of intriguing there.
Then you have Zay Flowers. I know we always talk about the the MVP awards, but Rookie of the Year award can kind of go to any position. We saw wide receiver Garrett Wilson win it last year, Offensive Rookie of the Year. He is plus 1,800 to win the Offensive Rookie of the Year this year.
I already got my money staked on Rashee Rice, and if I'm going to bet on any of the 4 first-round rookies, and I think you're with me on this, John, Jordan Addison, right?
Yeah. Addison's a good one.
It just feels silly to bet on there's 4 first-round rookies back to back to back. Once you bet on 2 of them, I feel like you're kind of fitting it out too much, right? It's probably going to be a quarterback. I'm not betting on more than one wide receiver.
Yeah, Mark Andrews at 875.5 receiving yards at minus 105.
I love that for drafting him, right? I love when Vegas is setting the line high.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
Vegas setting it high.
I don't like betting it, but I like that it makes you feel good about picking him in the 2nd or 3rd round.
Yeah. And they don't give me Zay Flowers odds on DraftKings, which is kind of weird, but they do give me an OBJ at 575.5.
Ew, dude. So the people out there that are drafting OBJ at 111,
know that Vegas thinks he's going to have 575 yards, give or take. So,
right. Like, again, that's one where I look at those, and when it's that low, and Vegas has been good about that. Like, when they put AJ Green that low, they were right. So like, when they put guys that low, if I just play 1 or 2 fantasy leagues and it's like $100 buy-in with my buddies back home, I'd rather just put $20 on OBJ to hit the over on that line than use that pick and kind of bet on him for the entire season in my hometown leagues, which I consider way more important.
Personally. Right. 100%.
Yeah. Last thing I want to say on the Ravens before we move on, Isaiah Likely last year in the games that Mark Andrews missed, he averaged 8.3 targets, had a 13 target game, right? He had the one bad game, but even in that game, he got 5 targets. He lined up at wide receiver on the year for 81% of his snaps, only blocked on 2.6% of his pass plays, which is like criminally low. Isaiah Likely, not a guy I'm particular like. He probably has no relevance unless Mark Andrews gets hurt. But if
Yeah.
Andrews does get hurt, plug him directly into lineups and use him in DFS.
100%. I want to point out here, our guy Toronto Dave in chat, love having him in here. I need to look more at betting odds to help me with fantasy. Coop, you wrote a fantastic
an
article last year breaking down wide receiver odds and comparing it to ADP. And like we were able to find some very obvious discrepancies in where guys were going and tiers and things like that. So, yeah, listen, betting odds definitely a good way to kind of just give you a feel. It's not obviously the NLBL, but use it as a tool, use it as a tiebreaker to see what's going on there.
Yeah, like so I'll definitely write that article again. Sorry, Lufa. I think we have a package delivered here.
That's
Lufa's
okay.
fired up.
Lufa's all about getting the betting odds for your fantasy work.
This is her favorite part, dude. Plus, she loves TD. She loves Toronto Dave, so she loves seeing him in the chat. But yeah, TD. So I write this article every year where I compare the odds, and we've actually directly pulled some takes from that where it was such a discrepancy we couldn't ignore it. The biggest one was the year before last. Remember the Debo Samuel
one? Yeah, Brandon Ayuk. Yeah,
everyone's drafting Brandon Ayuk way ahead of Debo, and Vegas. This is on top of the rushing work. Vegas had Debo getting more yards than Ayuk. So we were looking at it. We're like, well, can't draft Ayuk now. Right. No chance, right?
So and then last year, you used it to identify the fact that Debo Samuel was the only wide receiver in the top 10 of ADP that didn't have 1,000-yard receiving projection. And when we put that into Reddit, man, dude, Reddit was fighting. They were furious. They're like, you don't understand. He's got the rushing upside. I'm like, you're counting on the rushing upside of a wide receiver to carry his ADP, and that did not happen. So
no, it didn't. We were in on Waddle based on that. So yeah, I'm gonna run that back again. We'll see what we can figure out. Again, like sometimes what happens with that is you look at ADP and you want to draft the guys in fantasy. Sometimes you look at it and you want to place the bets. So I always put my little odds in there of what we're doing. We made some money off that. We got some good picks, but again, Vegas can be wrong too. So it's not the end all.
Yep. Move on over to the team that had the offseason, notable offseason last year. That is the Cleveland Browns. They obviously had Deshaun Watson last offseason, made the big splash. Watson was suspended for the first, was it 10 games of the year or something like that?
Yeah.
Last year. Finished with a 7-10 record. This year they traded for Elijah Moore. They, at least for now, lost Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt's still a free agent. We don't know. They've said they're not going to bring him back, but I guess we don't know yet. Best draft pick, they used the 3rd round pick, which was their first pick this year, drafting Cedric Tillman. Vegas gives them 9.5 wins, but it's plus 115 on the over. Their odds to win the NFC North are plus 425, and their Super Bowl odds are plus 4,000. Coop, what are we talking about here when it comes to the Cleveland Browns this season?
I mean, yeah, we're kind of going to see, because they didn't really do a whole lot. They basically sat there and said, hey, you know what? Basically what they're saying is if we had Deshaun Watson the whole year last year, we would have been contenders. That's what they're saying, right? Because they brought back pretty much the same team. And I do love, there's one player I do love at ADP from this group, and that's Amari Cooper. Just because last year with Jacoby Brissett, with a rusty Deshaun Watson, he was at or above his career highs in a number of different stats. Like right there, he tied his target total. Set his reception total, was like 20 off his yard total. I think he had the most touchdowns he's ever had. Like Amari Cooper was good last year. He was like a wide receiver 1, and that was with this same team except worse. So, and like I don't see a world where all of a sudden DPJ or Marquise Goodwin or Cedric Tillman become the top dogs. And Njoku's not going to get more targets. Elijah Moore, really, like he's going to be a cast off from the Jets and then surpass Amari Cooper. It's basically Amari Cooper versus injuries, in my opinion. I'm willing to take that bet all day. So I have a ton of Amari Cooper. It just, anytime you have a guy that we can put on a pedestal compared to his target competition, I'm in. So Amari, I'm in on. After that, it's the same question, right? Like, does Deshaun Watson spread the ball out too much and we don't get a consistent guy? Can Elijah Moore separate himself? Can Njoku separate himself? What are your thoughts, Sean, from these other pass catchers? Is there somebody else that intrigues you? Do you like the rookie at all?
So I definitely have some Tillman here late in drafts because of where his ADP is. It's not going to cost you anything. You like to talk about lottery tickets and scratch tickets. That's one of your best articles I think that you have out there during the offseason. And where he's going in drafts, he's a little bit of both almost, right? Like you can draft him, not have to start him right away, and see, hey, week 1 he ran 60% of routes, and you're like, all right, here's a play. Week 1 he writes 10% of routes. You can let him go if there's somebody better on in the on the free agent pool, or you hold on to him because he's costing you nothing. He's a bench spot. You're not forced to make a move on him right away unless your team absolutely needs to make a move in week 2. So I like Cedric Tillman as a late round dart throw here. I do think Elijah Moore is intriguing. I think the David Njoku ADP is a little high.
Yeah, I don't know if I like it.
Njoku last year was going off when guys were out of the lineup. I think it was and same thing was that Donovan Peoples-Jones also went off when David Njoku was out of the lineup. Right. So like those guys kind of played off of one another. So you really need Watson, like you mentioned, to spread the ball around, and they have Elijah Moore now. So like I do worry a little bit about Njoku going as a top 10 tight end here. It's not a skill thing. He's super talented. He's everything you want in an athletic pass catching tight end, but
freak.
I don't know if the volume's going to be there. And we'll touch on player props here. I'm also a little concerned on the Watson passing yards.
Right. Yeah. Like that's the thing. Like, and if you look at, we've seen that before with the tight end, with the Chargers last year with Gerald Everett. When guys were hurt, he was good. When guys were healthy, he was not good. And same thing with like Austin Hooper. Austin Hooper with the Falcons that year. The Falcons already throwing a ton, but when Julio or Calvin Ridley were out, he was the man. Otherwise, he was a nobody. So right. I worry about that too. I think the way I'm handling this, I'm not really drafting a lot of Njoku. If I do draft Njoku, I'm treating him like Freiermuth, where I'm drafting somebody else later too, just shooting for upside. Like whoever told you can only draft one tight end, foolish, man. That's right. Like we're sitting here drafting the second tight end, and it ends up being Darren Waller or Mark Andrews or Evan Engram. Like that's how you get those guys. So don't listen to people that say you only ever draft one, because that's how you miss out. Same with quarterback. That's how you miss out on Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes when they broke out. So,
well, how soon are you willing to draft 2 tight ends? I guess is the question, right? Like, are you drafting? If you're taking Njoku at 103, is he in? Are you taking him as your tight end 2? Or
there's too many I like in there. Like if I'm taking 2, I'm just like if I don't get like Waller or Pitts or somebody with crazy upside, I'm not gonna be the one that. Well, put it this way: I'm not going to be the one that drafts them at the ADP. Sure. I'll take Freiermuth or Njoku if they slide. Sure. Otherwise, I'll just wait and take like Schultz and Chig or like
right.
Whoever
you're a big Chig Okonkwo.
Right. So we'll figure it out later. Yeah, but if he slides though, and he's sitting there at tight end, if you're the only team that doesn't have a tight end and Njoku's there at 10 and 12, yeah, double tap tight end, grab him and grab some upside. So that's where I'm at. The other thing I'm doing is that like I like the idea of Elijah Moore too, John. So if I don't get Amari Cooper, what I'll do is I'll grab Elijah Moore, and then you look at DPJ and Cedric Tillman. DPJ's ADP is 162, wide receiver 72, undrafted in a lot of leagues. Cedric Tillman is 215, completely undrafted.
Undrafted in a lot of leagues.
So you grab Elijah Moore, and like you said, John, see what the usage is week 1. If somebody else is the guy, you can actually probably easily just swap them out on waivers. I did that last year, John, where I had Marvin Jones, you like Zay Jones.
Yeah.
Week 1, I was like, all right, give me Zay Jones. Like he was just there. So I just jumped right on the wagon with you. You can have it all, but if you do it the other way, you can't go back and draft Elijah Moore. So that's kind of how I'm treating it. If I get Amari Cooper, I'm not drafting another Brown pass catcher. Easy enough.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair to say, unless if we're talking best ball, obviously then you're stacking. It would make a lot of sense. But in redraft leagues, there's really no reason to be stacking up this offense.
You could draft Amari and Deshaun Watson. I like. But like you don't have to do Amari, Watson, and Elijah Moore. Just be a full Browns fan. That's crazy.
No, we're not Kangas man over here. No. Listen, I do love Nick Chubb though.
Yes.
I've loved Nick Chubb for a while. Love Nick Chubb again here, and I have seen comments even on posts that I've made about people who like to use small sample sizes when it helps their argument, and likes to ignore sample sizes when it doesn't help their argument. And in this case, Nick Chubb with Deshaun Watson, the 4 weeks that they played together, people wanted to point out that his usage in production really wasn't all that great.
Oh my God, shut up.
But are we really going to just assume that Deshaun Watson, after missing a year and a half, who's clearly rusty and had some tough matchups, that's the quarterback that's going to be for the Browns moving forward? Because if Deshaun Watson plays better, the offense will play better. Nick Chubb still was good. He just wasn't scoring as much. He was still getting the volume of touches here. I'm all in on Nick Chubb. I also think that he's going to see a little bit more work in the passing game. I know Jerome Ford is there. I know there are comments that Jerome Ford is going to get some work here. But we're talking about Jerome Ford. We're not talking about Kareem Hunt, right?
That's what I'm saying, man.
So tell me, are they going to honestly take Nick Chubb off the field in favor of Jerome Ford here? A sixth round pick, a fifth round pick a couple years ago? Like, no, Nick Chubb is going to be the guy on the field. I don't think he's going to get a 60 catch back here, but 35 catches is more than doable.
He could be 60 catch. I mean, dude, the thing is, it's just haters at this point for Watson and for Nick Chubb, because the Nick Chubb haters this whole time, what they tell us this entire time, John, what they say this entire time, they said if Kareem Hunt wasn't there, right? Like that's all they said. If Kareem Hunt wasn't there, if Kareem Hunt wasn't there, well, he's not there now, but Nick Chubb is still going towards the end of the second round. What are we do? Like they're honestly showing their ass by not taking him higher. Like they just hate this guy. Honestly, man, Howard Bender was right the whole time that like people are just haters because the excuse they used to have is gone, and he's still not being. He should be drafted. Honestly, if all things consistent, he should be going in the first round, towards the end of the first round.
Yeah.
So I'm willing to take Nick Chubb right after Saquon Barkley goes. I take Nick Chubb, like without fail. That's like the trigger for me. Like I personally, are you taking him ahead of Saquon?
No.
Yeah, see, I can't take him ahead of Saquon, but like right after Saquon goes,
Saquon has 90 catch upside. So
that's what I'm saying. So, but like right when he goes, I put him in my queue, and he's gone. He's coming to me. And Deshaun Watson, like people saying that maybe he sucks now. I've seen this guy play with all the different wide receivers, all these different random coaches, coordinators, and he was good every time. But now that now he's on the Browns, he can't be good. Of course,
he took a year and a half off.
He's gonna be fine.
He's a little rusty. He had some good moments. I'm gonna listen. You got to at least give him the opportunity, right? And you're getting discounts on him, so I'm fine. Like he's going off at QB9. Right. This is a guy that was a top 3 quarterback is like last year with Houston, right? Just ridiculous numbers here. He has plenty of talent around him to succeed. They have a good offensive line. So it's really on him. It's on him to meet the level of the player he was a couple of years ago.
Now I'll tell you one thing, and let's get into the betting side of it now.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing, John. No matter how much you believe in Deshaun Watson, and we do, they'll never give him the MVP. So betting Deshaun Watson plus 3,000, you're throwing your money away. Like this year they won't. Can you imagine if they give Deshaun Watson the MVP of the league this year, John? That would be a nightmare.
It
would be a complete nightmare.
You would have to lead them to like an undefeated season.
Comeback player of the year, John.
Like
God, dude. That would be maybe they would do that just because they know that there's no such thing as bad press, right? Just get everybody riled up. But like,
there's definitely such thing as bad press, but I don't think this is also the NFL. I don't think they care about bad press. So
that's what I'm saying. So they just want people talking about it, whatever it is. So, but there's no way he could throw for 70 touchdown passes. You cannot give that guy the MVP. So I can't bet that. What are their props? What are the Super Bowl lines?
If you're again, we just talked about using betting odds as maybe like a tool towards your drafting. DraftKings Sportsbook only has him for 3,600 yards passing. That is wildly low for a guy that should start 17 games. Like that is crazy.
So Kevin Stefanski came out this offseason and he said you don't have to establish the run to throw the football, right? Like he straight up said that, which I was shocked because he's like the kind of guy you expect to say, well, you have to establish the run to do play action. He said you don't have to establish the run to do play action, meaning like he's coming out saying that they're not holding back. They're not
to hit the over on 3,600.5 yards. He has to throw for 212 yards a game for an entire season.
Dude, they just said Kenny Pickett's at 3,300 and he's at 3,600. Like
Pickett, what did I have Pickett at? Yeah, let me see where I had.
I had him at. I saw 3,300, dude, which is
Pickett was 3,300. So again,
that's crazy.
212 yards passing per game would hit the over 3,600 yards for 17 games.
You can't possibly bet on Deshaun Watson to win MVP. If you want to bet on him to play well, that's the line.
I'm looking at the game logs. How many games last year did he throw for more than 200?
And I don't even honestly I'm very selective with my betting. I'm going to place money on that right after this.
He did it. So he only did it in 2 of the 5 games that he played. But again, like,
who cares, dude?
Can I give him a pass?
Last year was a wash. Wash. Whatever Jacoby Brissett can do, he can do.
Right. 211 yards passing. We like it's minus 110, so it's not like you're eating any crazy juice. That feels like a pretty good bet. The only thing I hate about futures odds betting is that it locks your money up for an entire season. So it's great when the season's over. Maybe you'll be able to cash some bets there. But
my economics teacher from Bentley would be pissed if I locked my money up like that. The old time value money problem, right, John?
And it's not even like a Super Bowl bet where you get like 5 plus 500 to be like bet 100 to win 100 in 6 months.
Yeah, but that one's free money. I mean, like let's take Jacoby Brissett. Like we started 11 games and had 2,600 yards in those 11 games. That is in 17 games, 4,000 yards. So Jacoby Brissett would have obliterated that number.
This is what I'm saying.
But Deshaun Watson's not going to.
It feels wildly low at 3,600 yards passing.
That's the smash. That's a tweet too.
Amari Cooper's 950.5 yards receiving.
I love that. I'm not going to bet it because of his injury history, but I love that number for where I'm drafting him.
That's knocked down because of what they have Deshaun Watson at, but he had almost 1,200 yards last year receiving. So, that's certainly something to pay attention to. Nick Chubb was at 1,225.5 yards rushing.
1,225. 1,225 is where they have him set.
Big number there.
Smash, second round, absolute smash. If he runs for 1,225, I mean, he could catch no passes, right? Like at 1,225, and he's an easily high end RB2. Like nobody runs for 1,000 yards anymore, right? Like, give me that all day long.
Yeah, last year,
30
did he have like 1,300 yards last year?
Yeah, he's a
1,500 yards last year and 12 rushing touchdowns on the year. He caught 27 passes. I was like, oh, what is he going to do? Maybe he gets 35. He had 27 just last year. Like,
he's
again, like why can't he catch 40 passes? Like why can't he do it? I think he can.
Oh my God, I can't. I'm so excited to get Nick Chubb. Now I want picks towards the back part, to the mid to back part of my drafts, because Nick Chubb, I could smash Nick Chubb early second, mid second, and feel really good about the two players I get. You could go like Jonathan Taylor, Nick Chubb. Oh boy, Jonathan Taylor Thomas.
I'm in there 100%. So that's our Browns preview. Any final thoughts here before we move on to the final team of the division?
Now let's get it going, dude. Let's get to the Bengals. Let's get to everybody's favorite, everybody's darlings.
The best team in the division, Cincinnati Bengals, 12-4 last year. Added another offensive lineman. Got Orlando Brown from Kansas City. That's a big get for them.
Crybaby Orlando Brown.
They really need to protect Joe Burrow. They just need to. They lost Samaje Perine. Does that mean the biggest name player in the offseason they lost? Maybe not, but maybe the most impactful for that offense. They drafted Miles Murphy in the first round, helping out that defense. Vegas has their win total at 11.5 at plus 110. That is a little bit of an interesting number for me there. Odds to win the AFC North are plus 140. Their Super Bowl odds are plus 1,100, which I also kind of like here. Coop, Cincinnati Bengals on the clock.
Yeah, let's look at the fantasy first. Jamar Chase, the question with Jamar Chase, do you take him at 1 or do you take him at 2? Howard Bender, slow draft with the Fantasy Alarm members. Make sure you're signed up for Underdog promo code Fantasy Alarm, and then get down. There it is right on your screen. Get down with us. We do drafts every week. We do slow drafts. We do fast drafts. We'll even do some best ball 10 drafts just for the people that live in like Vegas and Hawaii, can't do Underdog. But make sure you're signed up. Howard put his money where his mouth is. In the slow draft we just did, he had the first pick. He took Jamar Chase. Can't argue with it. I take Jefferson, but can you argue? Right?
Maybe. I haven't taken Chase over Jefferson yet.
Me neither. I'll take Jefferson every single time, but if somebody else wants to take Chase, I can't call them stupid. You know what I mean? Like it's not. So yeah. So it's like that's just one word. Hey, you know what? I'll allow it to be preference. I prefer JJ, but hey,
I still don't know if I would draft a wide receiver number 1 overall, anyways. But that's just again. I had an issue last year with Kupp going 1. I felt like people were drafting him at their ceiling. Obviously, last year, even if he played the whole year, he wasn't going to hit the numbers that he had the year prior. Can Jefferson keep getting better? Sure. But like probability is that like some point he hits a ceiling for what that offense is capable of doing. Chase, his issue is a competition that Higgins is still there. So like he can have a great year, but like, is he going to really be worthy of a number 1? Like I would rather take a running back again.
I'll tell you what, in my big hometown league, which is a 14-team league, if I'm on the clock at 1, I'm taking Christian McCaffrey. I've
Yeah,
already decided,
that's
especially in 14 team.
exactly where I'm
Yeah.
at.
If
Again,
you're in a 10-team league, though, I kind of understand it because the running backs that are come back, unless you know your team, your league is crazy running back heavy, the
sure.
running backs that are going to come back to you are not bad. They're
It's
really not
true.
bad. I see like Derrick Henry there.
Yeah,
Which
roster construction this year in 10-team leagues are ridiculous. 100% agree with you there. But you have Chase going number 2 again. Last year, you missed some time due to injury. Had 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns almost. As a rookie,
very
full
good.
season, 1455 and 13. So sure, I mean,
He's awesome.
to be a number 1 pick, don't you have to get 1,800 yards, or be a 20 touchdown guy? It just feels like you need some ridiculous numbers to be worthy of the number 1 overall
Think
pick.
of how long it took us to start taking Antonio Brown first. He was dropping. He had back to back to back wide
Mhm.
receiver 1 overall seasons in PPR, and it wasn't until season 3 and 4 that we actually said, "Okay, I'll just take this guy
Right.
1." And you're right, John. He was dropping. These were his seasons. He had all in a row here. He had 1,499 yards, 1,698. 1,834. Then he
Mhm.
missed a game and had 1,284, but had 12 touchdowns, still finished as a wide receiver 1. And then he had 1,533 and 1,297. Like, that's the guy you take at 1 in consecutive years. But
Yeah.
and he had 15 touchdowns in that 1,200. Like, he was just insanely good.
Yeah, again, it's nothing to knock Justin. He's certainly been good enough to be worthy of 1,800 yards and 8 touchdowns, right? He has to at least do that again,
Right.
at minimum, to be the number 1 overall player. So it just feels like you're
Too many people. It's the injuries, man. It's the
Yeah,
injuries. It's
I'd rather
too
take
many
the
people
running
drafting
back.
Jonathan Taylor last year saying never again. People,
Yeah. Yep,
So
I
I
agree
don't
with
know.
you.
But
So
Christian McCaffrey,
you have Chase there at ADP 2, T. Higgins coming off at ADP 22 at wide receiver 14, and then Joe Burrow wide receiver at ADP 56 QB5. So talking stacking, you can easily take one of them and then stack with Burrow pretty easily.
yeah. Well, the problem is with stacking Chase and Higgins is that what happens is Chase goes as the second pick, and then Higgins at ADP 22, he's going to somebody at that same swing, maybe even you. And then if you take them both, no one's letting Burrow get all the way back. So if you really want to go all in, you kind of have to go Chase, right? Chase here, Higgins here, and Burrow here.
Yeah.
He's not going to come back. I have no problem taking Chase and Higgins and then just saying whatever at quarterback or maybe trying to trade for Burrow.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I'm going to go all 3 bing, bang, boom. The one I find myself doing most of is, not getting Chase, taking Higgins, and then taking Burrow later on if you're going to do the stack. But it looks easy on paper, but it's actually not as easy as you would think.
Sure. How are you approaching the running back here with
Drafting him? They keep talking about a pay cut, but when you look at the dead money, and this is a win now team, obviously, as win now as they get it. Are you really going to cut Joe Mixon and then pay somebody else money, and then now you're also paying Joe Mixon the money he's on the books for, and somebody else?
Would you rather Joe Mixon or Dalvin Cook if you had to make a swap?
If there was no money on the books for Joe Mixon, I think I would consider it.
Sure.
But Joe Mixon, Joe Mixon's got his off-field issues, but so does Dalvin Cook.
Sure.
So right now, I think what they're trying to entice him to do is be a Bengal forever. That's what Zach Taylor wants. That's what would be best for him. And they're saying, hey, man, you're making too much money this year, but what if we just gave you a longer contract and you were a Bengal and we put I don't know what they call it, the jungle ring of honor or whatever they call it there.
Okay.
You hang your jersey there, whatever it is over there. I think that's what they want to do. And that's what it's all about. But I don't think it's going to boil down to, we're just going to cut this guy. They would have done it already. So I don't think it's going to happen. I see Better Boss in the chat saying Irv Smith is the guy he's most invested in. Maybe in best ball for me, but I can't rank him even third on the team in targets. That was the problem with Hayden Hurst, is that here's the reality. If you think the pecking order is Chase, Higgins, Boyd, and then Irv, leaving out Joe Mixon, who in per game targets, Joe Mixon got more than Hayden Hurst. Yeah. Even leaving him out, if you think that Irv Smith can be fantasy relevant in that capacity, then it doesn't matter who drafts Irv Smith, because whoever gets Joe Burrow is going to win the league.
Yeah.
I've only seen that one time where there's 2 high-end wide receivers, a third wide receiver that's relevant, and a tight end that's top 5 or so. That was a 2013 Broncos, and Peyton Manning threw 55 touchdown passes, and Orange Julius caught 10. And even while all that was going on, Wes Welker and Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders were all relevant. I mean, like, if you really think that happens, go ahead and draft Irv. Just make sure you got Joe Burrow, because that's what wins the league. For me personally, I'm just not drafting Irv. I'm not doing it. I'm not drafting Boyd either. I'm just taking the top 2 guys and mixing, and that's it.
And I'm full in agreement with you. Anybody else that you're looking at on this team?
I don't know, man. I don't like any of the backups. Like, people talking to me about Travion Williams. I guess Chase Brown, if you want to do it. I don't know, John. What do you think? 5th round pick running back?
No, I'm out.
Right? I'm out, man.
So I see this all the time, and we have people in chat and our Discord ask about drafting handcuffs. No. I don't do it. I do not draft a handcuff. I would rather draft a guy that I know is going to get on the field and be able to help my fantasy team than holding a bench spot on a guy that will only play if somebody else gets hurt. You're literally rolling the dice, wasting a roster spot in case of injury. I just don't do that.
There are only 2 conditions for me, which is 1, it's a handcuff plus, a guy that you can actually have standalone value, but goes to the moon if the starter gets hurt. Sure. AJ Dillon, obviously, obvious example, right? Like,
but he plays.
You can start him, yeah. So, like, but no, I'm not drafting. Like I'm saying, I'm not drafting Chase Brown unless I think Chase Brown is going to have that standalone value. Right. The other one is if the benches are crazy deep and everybody gets drafted and there's taxi squads or whatever else, then fine. Sure. The reality of a Chase Brown is you go in there and you use your last pick on him. And we talked about this earlier with the scratch tickets.
Yeah.
Use your last pick on Chase Brown. Unless Joe Mixon gets hurt week 1 or 2, that's the guy you're dropping to make your waiver move. And we're obviously making waiver moves in week 1 or 2 because that's how you win leagues. So, like, what do you do with Chase Brown? You just sit there to look at him for a week and then drop him? You use that spot on somebody else. So, yeah.
The number of people who held on to Alexander Madison last year for the 1 week he played wasted a roster spot.
Yeah, you probably missed out on adding literal league winners waiting for Dalvin Cook to possibly get hurt. Right. So,
yeah. So I don't do that. Like you said, I need guys that have standalone value. Kareem Hunt was a guy that we would look at. Jerick McKinnon is a guy that I'm drafting a ton this year because, like, he's gonna be on the field. He's in a great offense. Sure, he's not the starting running back, but he gets.
Let's hit the betting odds real quick and get everybody out of here, John.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's break it down here. Looking at their Super Bowl odds again, plus 1,100. AFC North plus 140 wins, plus 11.5. I like the over. I would probably bet all 3 of those plays.
Yeah, I mean, it's like bet all 3, and this is the kind of team where I would bet them to win the Super Bowl. 1,100, that's pretty good. 10 to 1 bucks. They were just in the Super Bowl a year ago, right? Like, if we believe in the offense, I'd rather just skip the betting the division and all that, and just bet them to win. And then if you bet them at 1,100 and they get to the AFC Championship against the Chiefs, then you do the math on whether you want to hedge or not, right? Throw $100 on the Chiefs to win. Throw $200 on the Chiefs to win. Now you're walking away with guaranteed money, right? Like, I don't mind getting in on these ones. What about MVP for
MVP for Joe Burrow this year? They got him with the second best odds at plus 750.
Nah, I'd rather just bet on them to win the Super Bowl.
Right. Passing yards for Burrow is 44.25.5.
Oof, man, that's so, dude. So they're thinking he throws for 800 more yards than Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
My goodness, dude. So I don't want to bet that because I think that's a great line. It makes me want to draft him.
Yeah, that's not bad. You got both wide receivers. Chase is at 1,275. This is what I'm talking about. So he's going to be a number 2 pick and have 1,275 yards receiving. He's going to have 15 touchdowns.
But draft Christian McCaffrey and hedge your bets by betting the over on Jamar Chase. There it is, John. There's a strategy. Lock it up, dude. Lock it up.
T. Higgins at 1,500 yards there receiving.
Yeah, well, the thing with T. Higgins is you're banking on touchdowns. That's why you're drafting him. So I don't mind that line either. I don't know if I'd even bet the over. Like, if Higgins has 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns, then he's well worth what you paid for him, and that's what you're banking on with a guy like that.
Yeah, and then finally Mixon 825.5 rushing.
No, not with Mixon. Too many ankle and soft tissues and all that. Again, running back, it's got to be a very specific situation for me to bet. I need to look at it and say that's wrong, which I don't think that's wrong.
I agree. So that's it, guys. That's our look at the NFC North here. Again, one last reminder, the Fantasy Football Draft Guide is live on site. Go to fantasyline.com/draft guide. If you're already an all-pro member, you have access to it. If you're not yet, you can get it today for free. You get a 7-day free trial as well. Go to fantasyline.com/all-pro. Promo code NFL50 will save you 50% off. If you don't feel like signing up, you just want the draft guide, you can buy it for $26.99. Go to fantasyline.com/all-pro, hit the draft guide button. buy it there today. I'm off for 2 weeks. You'll have Howard Bender with Andrew Cooper for the next couple of shows here.
Honeymoon.
On the honeymoon, Coop. I'll be cruising around Europe there. So
enjoy it, buddy.
Good luck to everybody then. We'll talk to you all later.